Now, a few weeks ago, Mayor Canal was up here, and say hello and this and that. And of course, we always talk. And he says he's got a new pshat on the Gan Eden story. Okay, now there must be something because Gan Eden story has been around for a long time. Everybody recognizes it as one of the central pieces in the Chumash and the central for the whole Torah world. Now, as you remember, I had a problem with Basar Echad. And I didn't discover it. This linguist from France, D'Alembert, discovered in 1812 that the phrase does not mean one flesh. It means one shape. Now, I'm not repeating anything of what I did with that, but that has triggered off pursuing that problem of what that means. What does it mean, one shape? What kind of shape? What are we talking about? That thing, for 3 months, has preoccupied me from the point of view of takeoffs, of things that it suggested. And I'm now finishing up one of the books that has this. It'll be about 75 pages. That is a report of what this thing triggered off. Okay. So I'm not concerned with that at all tonight. But what is this pshat? What is the Gan Eden story? Okay, so it's been taken to be that when you read the text and you read the last sections of the text, it says that the cherubim and a lahat, whirling, it means a whirling sword. A cherev, a lahat cherev, that went into opposite. It means a whirling sword that had a sharp edge on both sides that was like being flipped around random, so that you don't know where it is.
Lahat is what?
Lahat is related to this. It also
a flame?
means... Well, they didn't know what to say, so they included a flame. But conceptually, the flame came from the word cherev. Charav has a connotation of flame in certain contexts. So my view is that they didn't understand what the story was about, so they started with a certain set of assumptions that they took to be the story, and then they built up the pshat from the story. What I mean to say is, the story as it comes down and as we learned it, as you learned it, right, is that there was needed some kind of a guard after they ate from the Eitz Hadas, Tov V'Ra, and there was needed some kind of a guard that they do not eat from the tree of life. Because the text says if they'll eat from the tree of life, they'll live forever. Okay? Now, because this was what it was taken to mean, it was the more scary you make the guard, the more powerful the story becomes. So this idea of whirling around, random, is added. That's the root meaning, but it's got an addition from the point of view of flaming, like a flaming, jumping fire. So it came in, it wasn't 100% not true, because char in the language can carry a meaning of fire, of flame. But what I'm pointing out is that they gave the pshat and the interpretation of the words, there was a kind of an overkill that came in from the assumption that they understand what it is. We need a very strong guard. That's the story. The story like scares you. It scares you. There were the cherubim that were on the ark. And we're going to ask the question, what does that have to do with the whole picture? But they put the cherubim and this lahat turning around, and both of them together instill a kind of a threat that nobody should enter into the derech eitz hachayim. That's the lashon. Okay? Now, a word aside about linguistic associations. When you're going to make associations through language, they have to have a certain amount of looseness because they are speculative. We don't have it clean that that's the case. There's no evidence. So, for example, when it comes to cherubim, which we'll talk about a little later, there were a number of words in Assyrian and in Canaanite that were like demigods, like angels. And there's been a group of people in scholarship who have identified cherubim with the Chiti and the Assyrian and the Canaanite use of the word. But when you look at the word, I don't have to give it to you. When you look at the word, it's close, but it's not really powerful enough. When you have alternatives. If you don't have alternatives, one opinion stands. I mentioned that a number of times that I learned it took a long time to learn and realize if you have one opinion about something, it stands because there's no opposition to bounce the opinion off. When you have one opinion and a student says something else, then you can engage. The net result is that both gain, because the one who asked the question or the one who made the comment is now bouncing it off the other person, and by having the differences, we catch a more refined conception of the samenesses. The example I gave all the time was Euclidean geometry and non-Euclidean geometry. 1830 was non-Euclidean geometry, Riemann and Lobachevsky. When it came into the world, when you said the word geometry, you had to specify, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, Euclid, or are you talking about Riemann? Okay? Because there's another one. There are two geometries now. There's not one. Three, whatever it is. But the point is, before that time, you didn't ask questions, for example, about comparing the axiom set. There was nothing to compare it with. So when you have one, you don't have any differentiation, and you have things that sound fantastically rational, but because they're not being bounced off something of opposition, they loosen up from the point of view of argumentation. Now here's a good example. When you're doing by association of the names of these angels in the cultures that are surrounding, okay, it's not unreasonable that this was that they took for the ark the cherubim, and really it was the influence or the causality picture was that it came in from the Canaanite, Chiti, Assyrian world. Okay, so these are all speculative because you're dealing with associations. So this is the general principle about linguistic associations, which is the topic that we have here, because we're going to have to discuss what are these meanings. What does la lahat mean? What does the cherubim mean? Why does it enter the picture, and what is the whole story all about? So the first point is that this is how it's been taken. It's been taken that you have to have a shomer. It says v'shamru, to guard the way to derech eitz hachaim. If you read the Hebrew, it says v'shamru, and these guards, these cherubim and lahat that turned around the sword, were functioning to scare the people away. That's what comes through when you read it. That's what comes through when we teach it. Okay, I'm sure even if you went to a Chumash class with the kids, and if they touch it at all, I'm sure some of the kids get scared because it's a scary piece. But the point is, it says v'shamru derech eitz hachaim. Okay. So this has been the standard understanding of the text for 2,000 years. Meir comes over and he says he got a new pshat. New pshat on Breshit's story. What's the pshat? Shomer, shamru, the word, can mean to keep, to allow, like keeping the Shabbat. The Shamru ben the Shabbat. It's shomer is to keep. to fulfill the Shabbat. Okay? And shamar can also mean to guard against. So that it itself is neutral. It's just saying it's to guard against this. It's not saying, well, this is bad or this is good. It's just saying to guard can be to keep or to, scare somebody into not doing something. So to use the mashal of a door, there was the garden, the Gan Eden, and it had a gate. And so the traditional interpretation was that the shomrim of these two things, the cherubim and the thing, and the lahad, were there to guard against the people, anybody else, Adam or Chava or anybody else, entering into the Gan Eden. Why? Because it says Chai L'olam. Incidentally, L'olam is without a vav, it's chaser. That's another story, what that means. But usually when there's something chaser in the language, one has to look carefully at the word. So Allah, Olam, with a vav is indefinite time, okay, long time, unending time. And Alem, without the vav, is like weak. In other words, it's not the same word. Okay, now the other point is, when it comes to eating from the Eitz HaChaim will make you live forever, there's no concept of infinity, of living forever in the Chumash. That's a later concept. It comes in with the Greeks. There's no concept of the infinite. But another example of how we're building up the story. If you start with the story, then to say, oh, it's something important, living forever, is a big thing. I mean, that's a fantastic. So of course you have to keep people out, for whatever the reason. Then you give reasons in the drash, in the drashot. They give reasons why that's the case, why they have to be kept out. They already ate from the Eitz Hadas. Maybe before they ate from the Eitz Hadas, they were eating from the Eitz HaChaim, and that had a positive function. But somehow, after the Eitz Hadas, if they'll go and they'll eat from the Eitz HaChaim, it will have a negative function. Whatever we say, however we develop it, it's another indication that's coming from assuming the pshat and filling in the language. So ad olam means not forever or infinitely. Ad olam means for as long as there will be time, there will be this, unending, I call it, unending time. There's nothing to do with infinite. There's no infinite in the Chumash. There's no word Ein Sof. There's no word for infinite in the Chumash world. Okay, so this was the story. So Meir comes along and he says, there are two different meanings of shamar. One is to guard against, and the other one is to guard for, to keep. Meaning, what's the pshat? The new pshat is that they put these guards who didn't know why they're there. They're following orders. You got to be on guard duty, okay? Why? They don't know. They don't know why. We assume that it's bad. Some kind of a bad will happen if they enter the garden. But that's the assumption that's coming into the overall pshat. So Meir says, look, if you read the text carefully, you see that it means to keep the way open. To keep, not to close it off. To use the mashal of a door or a gate. So when the gate is closed, we needed these guards to keep it closed, that it should not be opened by the human being. It's not. He's out of Gan Eden now. That's all, whatever it means. He's out of Gan Eden, and he's not going to come and enter back into that. He has to do something, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Maybe on Atid Lavo, he'll go back, and so on, so on, so on, whatever it is. But the basic point is that Meir makes is that in the text, if it had like the mashal of a gate, so the gate is open. And to prevent it from being closed, they use the word shamar. In other words, to keep the positive quality of the thing. Okay? So that's clear. There's no mystery. It's straight poshet pshat. And I told Meir on the spot, for me, it is the most unbelievably important pshat that I have ever heard. Pshat. He's telling you, this is what the text says. Okay? Now, in some of my writing and teaching, I touched upon different aspects of this. But I didn't have it in the text. We touched upon it in the Ramchal and so forth. But it was in ideation form, but not with the text. I didn't see that point. I missed this point about shamar. That they're two different meanings. They're neutral. They're not saying one is good or one is bad. They're just saying open. To keep the door open. Okay, so now we have the problem. What is Eitz HaChaim? What is this derech Eitz HaChaim? Okay? What is this derech Eitz HaChaim that we have to remain open? Okay? So, in this story, of the Gan Eden story, there are a number of pieces. We'll get to the cherubim right away and so forth. But there's also, aside from Basar Echad, there's also the Chava, which in the Hebrew means life. Chava is Aim Kol Chai, the mother of all living. Now, it doesn't mean mother. It doesn't mean mother. It means, that's the sub meaning. It means origin, sustenance, maintenance of Chai. The mother feeds the infant. So it's a package of words that when you look in the LFA dictionary on aim, Aleph Mem, you see mother is down in the middle somewhere as another word for origin, sustenance, maintaining, feeding, so on, so on, so on. So there's a whole package of words that give the meaning of these two letters, Aleph, Mem. Okay? So the first thing we see is that by keeping the door open, the text is saying that regardless of what happened in the Gan Eden, of eating from the Eitz Hadas and so on, whatever happened, there's still reasonable opportunity for the human being outside of Gan Eden to relate to the Chaim that's depicted by the Eitz HaChaim. And here we have Aim Kol Chai. So that fits into the story when you start looking at the positive. And the reason I say it's a fantastic Chiddush is because once you hear it, your whole understanding of the Parsha and of the whole Torah system, as you'll see right away, the whole Torah system takes on a different meaning. In the Christian world, the whole idea of original sin and so on, a lot of these things are related to the way they interpret the Gan Eden, the way they interpret the story. And generally speaking, they, and Judaism as well, have interpreted the story in this other way. So it fed into Western civilization. It's not a small thing, it's a big thing. It's a big thing. It's Western civilization to the core. Because as you well know, the Bible, okay, Old Testament and New Testament, whatever, the Bible is intrinsic to the humanistic dimension, let alone the religious, but to the humanist dimension of what we call Western civilization. I mean, that's built into Western civilization. So it's not just a local thing, it's a big thing. It's putting Western civilization on the line and saying, we missed something. We missed something. And what we have to do is restore it. See, look at the language. I'm changing gears because we're changing the understanding of the story. So what are we supposed to do? So right off the bat, we see it's related to sexuality. Not only Basar Echad, which is another issue about shape, but the fundament of life is sexuality and eating. The two fundamental characteristics of human being in respect to life system is eating and all of its dimensions, and sexuality in all of its dimensions. Okay, so we see that we have to keep open a derech, a way to Eitz HaChaim, which translates into a way open for what can we call a richer concept of sexuality. In other words, in the Chumash world, that has been lost by the West, was a certain orientation to the man-wife, husband-wife relationship that has been lost in this overall pshat that was taken bimkom the real pshat. So what was lost? What was lost in the situation? What was lost was the relationship between husband and wife, where there's a primacy on the female, on the woman. Within the Chumash it says Chava, which means life, is Aim Kol Chai. It never says Adam. It's called Av Kol Chai. Now, for relations, both are needed, right? I mean, both are needed. But it's Aim Kol Chai and not Av Kol Chai. What that translates into is that in the intimacy of the husband-wife relation, there's a certain primacy on the woman. This comes through in the Kabbalah explicitly, in the Ari and in the Ramchal, that even in the Ari he says explicitly that whereas tefillot all year round, when you do the kavanot, the mental preparation to do tefillah, so the male is active, whatever that means. And the female is receptive. The male gives and the female receives. Okay? So here we see, in a sense, both are needed, but one has the active dimension, whatever it is for the moment, and the other one has the passive dimension. So in all the tefillot, except Ne'ilah for Yom Kippur, and, strangely enough, Chanukah and Purim, for Chanukah and Purim and Ne'ilah, that special prayer for Yom Kippur at the end, for those three prayers are the exception to the general rule about tefillot, where the masculine, the male, the husband is the active, and the woman is the receiver. On Ne'ilah and Chanukah and Purim, no. The man is the receiver, and the woman is the giver. Now, for the moment, and especially tonight, I'm not going to explain what that means. But I'm just pointing out the fact. The fact is that in the relation, the way the relation is viewed is that it's not a contract. It's not two people entering a contract where one needs the other. Because one does need the other. I mean, you have to have two people for the relation. Okay, but the conceptualization is not built, for example, on contract. It's not a contract that you need me and I need you, and therefore we bond together and we have this intimacy together. In the, whatever you want to call it, contract, the relation, there is the primacy of the nekeva. Now, a way to look at this is that, because the problem is what kind of primacy? How does that operate? Well, what's going on? So I put it this way, just to say something, otherwise you leave it blank. The point is, whenever, in a man-woman relationship, husband-wife relation, whenever there is a touch, even the slightest touch of narcissism, of self-love on the part of the male, that's sufficient to indicate that the dominance of the woman or the primacy of the woman is not at its fullest. It's coming in from the negative. Whenever there is a touch of narcissism is self-love, self-respect, self-concern. In the literature on narcissism, in the psychological literature, I mentioned it once before, that when you look it up and you see, even Freud in his 1914 paper on narcissism said, I can't define it from the positive. It's like, what is it? So there's no real solid definition. They call it healthy narcissism. When a person has a good self-image, a healthy self-image. But what exactly is that? And so on and so on. So it turns out that when you look further, the list, there's 10, 15 pages of unhealthy narcissism. But very little on healthy narcissism because there's no way to define it. And Freud picked it up in 1914 in his paper in the field. So what I did was make an analysis of this in terms of from the negative. So I'm trying to capture what is this special relation when there's the primacy of the woman, of the female. So I'm saying from the negative, if there's to any degree a touch of narcissism in the male behavior, that's indicative that the primacy of the female is not complete. In other words, there has to be some kind of a relationship where it's not a contract, a dominance. It's somehow whatever that means. Somehow the essence of the relationship requires the primacy of Aim Kol Chai, of the woman. Now that is a big, big, big topic and yields the sod of the whole Kabbalah system and the whole Jewish approach, Torah approach to sexuality, which has gotten lost in Western civilization by taking the other shot. So,
where's the jump from Meir's Kiddush?
Because we're saying
from the
Daddy, we're watching
opening the gate.
Yeah, we're watching that on the level of the Yachid. No, we're watching on the level of the Yachid. It's still open to achieve the primacy of the woman. It's open. That's what Chaim means. Chava means Chaim.
Oh, okay.
That's what Chava means. Chava means existence. Existence, life are synonymous terms in the Chumash text. And when it says Aim Kol Chai, I don't want to get in that tonight more deeply, but what does that mean? Aim Kol Chai. First of all, it doesn't say Chaim. It says Chai in the singular. What does it mean? Aim Kol Chai. When the usual translation is mother, what? It's talking about the animals. She's not the mother of the animal world, right? She's not feeding, nursing an animal. She's talking to the human being. So we're talking about Aim Kol Chai, meaning all the Chai in the human being. All the Chai in the human relations. And that's why it's singular. It's not plural. It's a singular, as we say in the kingly we. We, meaning I, but when the Elohim talking to the Malachim, and he says, we will Naaseh Adam, B'Tzalmel, we will create, we. It's the royal we. So here we have the same thing. It's the royal Chai. Because it's the Chaim in the human being. Otherwise, what does it mean, Aim Kol Chai? Because it turns out, that's why I'm not doing it tonight, but it turns out that everything takes its quality of Chaim from its relation to the human being. Now, we don't have that in the West. That whole idea, which I work out, is not in the West. Because the West says we classify things into inanimate and animate. And what does that mean? Life is defined as motion. So a plant is alive because it has stable. It doesn't move, but it grows. And then an animal has locomotion, Greek, right out of the Greek understanding. We classify in terms of animate and inanimate. But in the Torah system, as understood in Moshe Rabbeinu and in the Chumash and underneath this whole shot of the text, is something else. The animal is like a stone. like a rock. It gets its life properties from its relationship to the human being. Now, we can't. What does that mean? You can't understand that. You can maybe get a glimmer, but what does that mean? You're crazy. What do you mean? It's already living. And the human being is a species of animal with rationality and so forth. As you go up the line, the animality gets lost. There we're the same as the animal. And then we go up the line, and then we become human because we eat with friends, we make a bracha, and blah, 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 blah. So the social, psychological aspect comes in. But basically, we are animal. I watched a program 2 or 3 weeks ago on the TV, here on Channel 8, wherever it is, on sexuality, and they said, a professor, one guy said, the fact that the woman has breasts to nurse the child is a reminder of our basic animality. Mm-hmm. Now, wow, that's as far from Torah as you can get. But because of this pshat in the text, feeding into this whole negative approach to sexuality, and I'm not going to fan it out in different ways, but because of that whole thing, Western civilization, as it's come down, and as it is today, has lost this kind of talk. We don't have that. Still today, in Rav Soloveitchik books, and people who write about this, they say, look, we had a sexual revolution in the West, right? It's 100 years old, whatever. Rousseau wrote his Confessions in 1830, whatever it was. In his Confessions, a book on confessions, he talked about his relations with women and so on and so on. Well, I mean, he was ostracized for the ones who read it. It was like when I went to school, they said, you can't read D.H. Lawrence. D.H. Lawrence, Sons and Lovers, a great novel in the British tradition, you know, and you're not allowed to read that. It's too, quote, dirty, sexy. And we don't, I mean, it can't be given in a university class. And there were courses. I mean, I studied the British novel, and D.H. Lawrence, Joyce, Beckett, and were on Proust. They were part of the great literature. I mean, if you read Sons and Lovers and other books by D.H. Lawrence, you see a great writer but who opened. Then Kinsey. Then when Kinsey came along, and there was this Kinsey report, there was before that a few others, but that opened up an unbelievable set of beliefs in terms of sexual behavior. In other words, the sexual behavior is like surprise. I mean, it may not have been surprise to the particular person, an individual who may have been involved in things, but as in general, it in effect made a new world.
A better world?
Never mind whether it's better or worse. And of course, as you know, when you look more carefully, it's never black and white. And from one angle, it has positive aspects, and from another angle, it has negative aspects. So eroticism, Hollywood, different dimensions of the material function in different ways, and that's for some other time to really have a session on how these things function and how to look at what's going on today, where we have this continuation of the sexual revolution. Okay, so this was the basic orientation, was that there was a certain dominance of the woman. Now look, in polygamous societies, it says in the Chumash, the human being will live 120 years, right? It says in Mefurash, the lifespan of the human being is 4 generations of 30 years each, 120 years. And that's in general the case. There may be some exceptions of great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, but generally speaking, 4 generations is the age that's given. So this again comes and says, what is this unending life? I mean, 120 years, that's the projection. So it doesn't mean, it gives a chizuk to what I said before about ad olam, about what that means. Okay, but the basic point here is that the woman has a special characteristic of being the giver, the sustainer, the maintainer of the male-female sexuality. So it says in the text, not only 120 years, but it says in the text that because they ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, it says the Nachash will have the craw on his belly, right? And the human being, Adam, the man, will have to work with the sweat of his brow. You remember the story, right? And what does it say about the woman?
Childbirth.
What does it say about the woman?
Bear children with pain.
And she'll have pain in childbirth,
Subservient to her husband.
and she'll be subservient to her husband. So, here we come back. She'll be subservient to her husband. Well, wait a minute. If she's subservient to her husband, so that'll carry over into everything, including the sexual. So what the text is saying, that even though socio-politically, in a polygamous society especially, the woman will be subservient to the husband, there's an exception. The exception is in the sexual relation. That's the logical implication of the package that I'm putting together based on Meir's pshat of the text. It's saying that the gate is always open, not for the society as a whole, not yet, that's going to be Latid Lavo, but for the Yachid, for the individual, to walk through the gate and achieve the no narcissism, no self-love that in any way looks down, makes the woman feel bad, wrong, piece of meat, any adjective, any bitui that would come out of the woman's mouth that would indicate from the opposite side that the man is manifesting some kind of a self-love that's unhealthy. And here's this big list of psychological properties of the unhealthy narcissism. So that's what the story is all about. So the story now, built on Meir's pshat, is not a local thing. It's Western civilization on the line. Western civilization has to restructure itself, not just in terms of a sexual revolution, but a sexual revolution that has in it the narcissism-free world. Well, you said before, today we have a sexual revolution, but what's coming in is undue eroticism, romantic love. I'll live for you forever. Okay? I'll always be there for you. Okay? I'll put my life on the line for you. We're Romeo and Juliet. I mean, all of the motifs in the literature and in the culture are part of a revolution, but on the other hand, not yet, not quite fulfilling what the text is indicating about leaving the gate open to the privacy of the female, of the woman. And a lahat, whirling, it means a whirling sword. A cherev, a lahat cherev, that went into opposite. It means a whirling sword that had a sharp edge on both sides, that was like being flipped around random, so that you don't know where it is.
Lahat is what?
Lahat is related to this. It also means
flame?
Well, they didn't know what to say, so they included a flame. But conceptually, the flame came from the word cherev. Charav has a connotation of flame in certain contexts. So my view is that they didn't understand what the story was about, so they started with a certain set of assumptions that they took to be the story, and then they built up the pshat from the story. What I mean to say is, the story as it comes down and as we learned it. Now, I'm not repeating anything of what I did with that, but that has triggered off pursuing that problem of what that means. What does it mean, one shape? What kind of shape? What are we talking about? That thing, for 3 months, has preoccupied me from the point of view of takeoffs, of things that it suggested. And I'm now finishing up one of the books that has this. It'll be about 75 pages. That is a report of what this thing triggered off. Okay. So I'm not concerned with that at all tonight. But what is this shot? What is the Gan Eden story? Okay, so it's been taken to be that when you read the text and you read the last sections of the text, it says that the cherubim, as you learned it, right, is that there was needed some kind of a guard after they ate from the Eitz Hadas, Tov V'Ra, and there was needed some kind of a guard that they do not eat from the tree of life. Because the text says if they'll eat from the tree of life, they'll live forever. Okay? Now, because this was what it was taken to mean, it was the more scary you make the guard, the more powerful the story becomes. So this idea of whirling around, random, is added. That's the root meaning, but it's got an addition from the point of view of flaming, like a flaming, jumping fire. So it came in, it wasn't 100% not true, because char in the language can carry a meaning of fire. Now, a few weeks ago, Mayor Canal was up here, and say hello and this and that, and of course we always talk. And he says he's got a new pshat on the Gan Eden story. Okay, now there must be something, because Gan Eden story's been around for a long time. Everybody recognizes it as one of the central pieces in the Chumash, and the central for the whole Torah world. Now, as you remember, I had a problem with Basar Echad. And I didn't discover it. This linguist from France, D'Alembert, discovered in 1810, 1812, that the phrase does not mean one flesh. It means one shape, a flame. But what I'm pointing out is that they gave the pshat and the interpretation of the words. There was a kind of an overkill that came in from the assumption that they understand what it is. We need a very strong guard. That's the story. The story like scares you. It scares you. There was the cherubim that were on the ark. And we're going to ask the question, what does that have to do with the whole picture? But they put the cherubim and this lahat turning around, and both of them together instill a kind of a threat that nobody should enter into the derech eitz hachayim. That's the lashon. Okay? Now, a word aside about linguistic associations. When you're going to make associations through language, they have to have a certain amount of looseness, because they are speculative. We don't have it clean. That's the